Good morning, students. Yesterday we had seen how the rules of the game were set when it came to marriages, when it came to how one family associated with the other family for the sake of kinship. Then we also saw the concept of how the ruling families used to have the influence on through their actions on the other segments and the rest of the society. So today we start with the topic rules of marriage. And as students, please remember, I have told you yesterday as well, please look at these boxes very carefully because the terms like endogamy, exogamy, polygamy, polyandry, these are very, very important and confusing terms as well. Okay. Uh, so continuing with at the same time, and this is where we start, at the same time marrying them into families, that is marrying them into women them into families outside the kin was considered desirable. We all know that we do not go into the same we Indians do not marry within the family. So this is what it is trying to tell us. So this system called exogamy, that is literally marrying outside, meant that the lives of young girls and women belonging to families that claimed high status were often carefully regulated to ensure that they were married at the right time and to the right person. This gave to the rise of the belief that Kanyadan, or gift of the daughter in marriage, was an important religious duty of the father. That's something which is practiced even today in very much, and that has not gone. It's practiced today within all parts of India, actually. Faced with this may lead to question. Okay, so faced with this challenge, the Brahmins responded, and as I had said, students yesterday, when you have an enormous amount of geography, when the empire expands, when the society becomes more and more complex, when people from different backgrounds, people from different cultures, when they start becoming part of one geography, they start becoming part of one one town, one empire, one kingdom, then naturally you have to make rules of engagement. Otherwise, there would be chaos. There would be social chaos. There could be law and order problems. There could be social upheavals, and all those things need to be taken care of. And different lawgivers at that point in time, that is, we are talking about 300 years before Christ, 400 years before, on 500 BC, when different lawmakers of India, they started coming up with Dharma Sutras and Manusmriti, that is one of the most famous Dharma Sutras of all time. Now, uh, coming to the second paragraph, while the Brahmin authors of these texts claimed that their point of view had universal validity and that they prescribed had to be obeyed by everybody, it is likely that real social relations were more complicated. Besides, given the regional diversity within the subcontinent and the difficulties of communication, the influence of Brahmins was by no means all pervasive. What is interesting is that Dharma Sutras and Dharma Shastras recognized as many as 8 forms of marriage. Of these, the first 4 are considered as good, while the remaining were condemned. It is possible that these were practiced by those who did not accept Brahminical norms. Students, you have to again understand that, as I just said, different rules have to be formulated when different people from different and diverse backgrounds and diverse cultures, when they all come together, and naturally there are certain rules. Every institution has to come up with the rules of engagement. Now, but what it is trying to say here is that uh, all of these lawgivers were usually Brahmins, of course, because they were the ones who were considered to be, uh, dealing with the academics and the laws and philosophy and those kind of things, because different our society was very segmented. Different segments of the society were busy with the different other things. Brahmins would not be farming, crops, and the farmers would not be philosophizing, and they would not be astronomers and mathematicians. So every segment was busy doing their own what they were good at and what they were best at. So, besides, given the regional diversity within the subcontinent and difficulties of communication, the influence of Brahmins was by no means all pervasive. Since you have to understand that Brahmins could just recommend certain things, ultimately, all of that has to be, it's a thing of common sense. And you being class 12 students, you should understand that the Brahmins could just make recommendations that this is how it should be done, this is what is ideal, this is what would be good for the society in future. But ultimately, those things have to be execution. That is when the execution part comes in. Those things have to be executed by the rulers, by the emperors, by the kings. They need to see the merit in those proposals, that yes, what has been suggested is the right way to go, right? So you cannot say that whatever Brahmins would say and write or suggest would automatically become a law, or it would be inscribed in the annals of history. No, nothing like that. What they would suggest is just a recommendation, that's through their knowledge, through their enormous amount of intellect which they used to have, they used to reach to certain conclusions, and then they used to recommend it. And then it was on the king of that place or the ruler of that place to accept those recommendations. And that's what it's been talking about. And here in this paragraph, though it appears to be a very kind of nothing revealing here, but I see this paragraph as a very important one. What is interesting is that Dharmashutras and Dharmashastras recognized as many as 8 forms of marriages. Of these, the first 4 were considered the good ones, while the remaining 4 were condemned, that is, were not liked or criticized. It is possible that these were practiced by those who did not accept Brahminical norms. Now, students, you have to understand that when in a society, when you have a situation where uh, there are different kinds of marriages which are getting evolved, it clearly is an expression that the society was getting more and more complicated, and every segment of the society was not kind of adhering to just one rule which was there. So you had to adapt, you had to improvise. So they must have started with one or two systems of marriages, and gradually they realized that people from certain other cultures were not very okay with that, because they historically had been practicing some other form of marriage for thousands of years, and they would definitely not be willing to sacrifice that. So the empire has to accommodate that practice of marriage as well. In similar fashion, because you have to understand, students, that India happens to be a very, very ancient culture. And people, even at that point in time, even when you're talking about 2000 years ago and 2500 or 600 years ago, you have to understand that even at that point in time, a practice or a culture or any kind of tradition would have been um, in use for at least 2000 years or 1500 years, because that's how old the Indian culture and society is. Now you cannot just ask people to debunk all those cultural practices. So naturally, a society, to avoid friction and tension, they would also embrace those cultures and practices, because it doesn't make any sense to cause social conflicts. But let me just give you an idea. The most important and the most popular form of marriage, that is something which is practiced even today in India among Hindus, and anywhere in India for that matter, and from whichever caste people might be coming from, is the Brahma marriage, whereby the simple form where the groom, that is the dulha, who comes to the to take away his bride, the father of the bride actually he voluntarily invites the groom and his whole set of baratis, and very respectfully receives them once they come to to take when the guy comes to take his bride along with his whole family and his whole khandan, and everything has to be done in presence of the society to give that marriage the legitimacy, because if you do it in a very hush 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 fashion, then that legitimacy is not there. So this is a marriage that is a Brahma marriage, which has been historically been practiced uh, in in our Sanatan Dharma and in this whole Indian subcontinent for thousands of years, and it remains unchanged, right? As you could have figured it out yourself, that even today the guy comes, takes away his bride, and very respectfully received, and everything is a great affair. So and the whole society in its presence legitimizes that relationship, that yes, you are now a man and a wife. So this is the one which is considered to be the the best form of marriage. And then there are other forms which are applicable to certain sections of the societies. There are certain marriages which are which has been always practiced within the Brahmins, and there would be certain forms of marriages which are practiced within certain sections of the population. Like, for example, then there is a Gandharva marriage, then there is an Asura marriage, being practiced among the people with a very violent temperament, and Asura, who would not be considered to be very civilized like the other sections of the population. So they had their own different sets of marriages. So that is how it is. So as you can see, there in total we have documented 8 forms of marriage. So which clearly gives you, and as I have just and then I'm forgetting one, which is again a very Rakshas form of marriage, because we've been watching Ramayana during our this holiday and quarantine, or whatever you choose to call it. What was Ravan trying to do when he had snatched away Sita by deception, and he takes her to Lanka to marry her? Now, what is that? That is, if he had been able to marry her and she would have agreed to marry him, then it would have been considered a Rakshas form of marriage, whereby you first take her away forcibly, and then take her to your own place and your home, and then compel her, and then you keep her in seclusion, and then you compel her against her own wish and desire to marry you, and that kind of thing. So that is clearly not what a Brahma form of marriage is, whereby the girl's father invites the boy and his whole kunba and his whole khandan and everyone involved to come, and it is a he voluntarily invites, and it is, and once they come, he very respectfully and very jovially receives them, and he considers it as his honor that so many he gets an opportunity to actually be hospitable to so many people. So as we can see, that Rakshasa form of marriage is anything but what Brahma form of marriage is. So all this is actually giving you an idea about the complexities of the society. It gives you an idea about how diverse the society is, and how it is very difficult for one particular ruler to say that this is one thing and everyone has to conform to it, because every segment within that population has been following that particular culture for probably that's or that strand of that culture for at least 1,000 years. It's a part, that is something that they have always known. So this is what we are talking about now. Tomorrow we will start the Gotra of men. Thank you.